Welcome to the finish line with So Very Easy. My name is Laura, and the finish line is all about finishing our quilt tops. And today I have a quilt with 2 4 and 8-inch finished squares, and it's going to be a perfect one to do the clamshell, and that will mean there will be very little marking. The clamshell pattern is a series of half circles. We have these half circles that go along the quilt. The next row, we still have those half circles, but they're coming in between. And the next row, we'll go back to the original spot. Normally, we would draw these grids so that we can keep those shapes in between and lined up. On the quilt, I have 2-inch finished squares, 4-inch finished squares, and 8-inch finished squares. I'm going to use a 4-inch grid. So I'll be able to put 4 of these together for one size. The 4 will be able to be used on their own. The 8-inch squares I need to divide in half. And a 3.5-inch ruler will fit those size squares. I want a circle to be a 1/4 inch smaller all the way around, so that 3.5 will match my 4. If you have a 5-inch square, you're going to need a 4.5-inch circle. I did take time and sprayed my rulers with a product named Grippy. It will be a lot easier to use these rulers if they do not slide. So you can put some type of little grippy dots on the back or spray your rulers. I'm also going to use a 1/4 inch ruler. Now these rulers, I do not need them to be quilting with. I'm just going to use them as guides. So they do not have to be a ruler that you can do ruler work with. I've chosen this orange, which is sort of an orangey pink red color, and it's called Cherry. It's from Primo Soft. It's 100% polyester, but it really looks like cotton. And that polyester means I do not have as much lint, but I do love that color for this quilt. I did layer my 3 layers together with a fusible batting, and because of that, I do want to use a non-stick needle because this fusible bat does have an adhesive to it, and those non-stick needles really make it easy so they don't gum up. To mark my grids, I'm using a chalk, and this chalk is from Urban Elements. It's a special chalk that's designed for quilting. I could draw on that quilt, and when I'm finished drawing, a little heat with the iron takes those marks right off. So I'm going to grid these larger squares with the chalk. That's all I'm going to need to get this quilt going. But I do want to mark up the back of my ruler. The back of my ruler does have these little marks in them. So the ruler is divided in 8s. And in my case, I do have this little groove, which is a mark. I do want to darken those little grooves. I'm just going to take a pen and mark those little marks so they're going to be a little bit darker for me. And that way, when I turn them over, I'm going to be able to see those marks. And I don't mind using something permanent because I know these marks I use often. So I'm okay if they don't come off. So I'm going to mark my grids, and that's all I'm going to need to go to the machine. I have my 3.5-inch ruler, which will fit in that 4-inch mark. What I want to do is sew around here, pick this up, move it over, and sew around. When we do use ruler feet, it's a 1/4 inch from the inside of that needle. So we need to leave a 1/4 inch space. So having an additional ruler with a 1/4 inch space is going to be helpful. I want a 1/4 inch up from this top and from the side, because when this foot goes around, it will be sewing a 1/4 inch from this ruler. It's not sewing right along that ruler. So I can take anything with that 1/4 inch and put the 1/4 inch there so that I know where to place the ruler. I need a 1/4 inch from the one seam and a 1/4 inch from the other seam. So I'm going to put that foot on, and I'm going to stitch all the way around, and I'm going to stop. Pick up the ruler and move it over. If you need to have a little guide to make sure that you're at that 1/4 inch, just put that up and continue stitching. So I'm going to be able to stitch and keep moving this ruler. So my foot is down. I have the 1/4 inch on both sides. Now I can stitch around that ruler. I'm going to go all the way over. And stop at that end. Pick up the ruler and move it over. The little markings on that ruler will help me line up my squares. For the first row, I do want to check that 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now I can do my next half circle. And it's going to hit that 1/4 inch mark right at the top. And stop back at that bottom. Move the ruler. Check that 1/4 inch. And around we go. So we can already see those 3 half circles. I'm going to continue and do all of this bottom row doing those circles. Now I'm doing it on my Q20, but you can do it on any sewing machine, even your domestic, as long as you have that foot on. So that first row will only have these single half circles. For this block, which is a solid 4-inch block, I don't have that halfway mark. So I'm going to be able to use a ruler and have it marked from this top at 2 1/4 inch. So that line equaled up to the rest. Now I can finish off the next one. I'm going to be doing these by rows. You can do them left to right or right to left, or you can go in one direction and then go back up in the other direction. This was the starting point. My next half circle is going to go in between. That's where those marks on the ruler will come in handy. And that's how those circles are going to go. But I do need to stop off the quilt and come on in. So I'm going to do a 1/4 circle. So we just need to envision that this is a little bit longer. I can now start off this quilt and stitch down. And I'm going to stop when I get to the top of this circle. Line up the edge of that foot to the edge of the ruler. And around we go. And I'm stopping right there at the top of that circle. Now I can do a full half circle. And you can always check and make sure you have a 1/4 inch all the way around. Stopping right at the top of my circle. I'm going to continue and do these half circles all the way around. I do like to quilt with gloves. Not that the ruler slips, it just gives me a better grip onto the fabric. And I'm going to do that second row. So the half circles are in between the first row. And quilt. When I get to the end, I'm going to do another 1/4 circle and go right off of the fabric. You can travel up and then go down, or stop and go in the same direction. You'll find one way is more comfortable than the other. We will also be able to use these marks on that little circular ruler. My halfway marks will match that one line. my line down the center will match that little point. So as we get going, we will not need the ruler. So I know I'm going to have that 1/4 inch up here and the 1/4 inch on that side. So I'm going to be able to just use this ruler and those markings. And this is what the clamshells look like when it's finished. Let me show you an example on a plain white fabric with a 2-inch grid. This is a 2-inch grid. So each of these blocks are 2 inches, and that will match that 3.5-inch ruler. And if you want to check the size of the ruler, I have 3.5 inches from center point to center point. I'm going to use these lines sort of like X marks the spot. The horizontal line will fit on one area, the vertical on another. That gives me that 1/4 inch up at the top, so I won't need that extra ruler. Line up my X's and go around. I now have hit that line. I'm going to be able to use those lines and line them up. So having the grid lines and the marks on the ruler are very helpful because we do not have to do any additional marking. Those horizontal and vertical lines will match up on the drawn lines. Let's let that foot run along the ruler. And I can continue using those horizontal and vertical lines. If you don't have a quilt with a grid, you can draw your own grid. And by using those grids and the marks on the ruler, it will line up perfectly. If we come to a spot where the lines don't match up, and maybe it's near the edge of the quilt, there is a way we can do that. Line up that horizontal line and stitch to the center point. Stop at that center point and then readjust your ruler so that the lines match up. So I've moved this ruler over just a little bit. It's still going to give me that curve shape, but I'm going to hit those points. And it's a way to just sort of get that to work. If you're going one row to the other, you're going to be able to just walk that machine up. You're going to go past that ruler, come down until that edge hits. Now continue. If you do grids, it's definitely very easy to see. And those lines on the ruler definitely help it. So we don't have to do any additional marking. It is a very traditional pattern, but it does have a beautiful finish. And when those markings are gone, it really is a pretty little pattern. We have those shells that look nice on the back. They look nice on the 8-inch squares. The 4-inch squares right to those 2-inch squares. It's a traditional pattern, but it can still look very modern. So clamshells are very easy to do if we do use our circular rulers. And it's great if they do have those marks on them. If not, we can always add our own marks. You can draw the grids on your quilts and follow the grid lines. Or if you happen to have a quilt that has those grid lines already sewn into the pattern, well, then it's even quicker. Thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe, and as always, come on back. Let's see what we're working on next time in the sewing room. Bye for now.